that to me is not a typical explanation of human design. Most people would talk about how it's a synthesis of the Kabbalah and the chakra system and all these other things and the I Ching. And yes, that's a super important part of what it is made of. But to me, that's not the exciting part.
Carlene, welcome to the podcast. I am grateful to have you with me because I'm so intrigued by the idea of human design and would love for you to launch us off by saying, what is human design?
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me, Rima. I'm so excited to be here. The the idea of human design comes first from astrology. It's actually what I consider the next level, where we think of astrology having the 12 signs around us of energy. There's actually now 64 signatures of energy. So it gets a lot more specific. And for me, that has been super helpful to really get validation of myself, how I work, how I operate, and what is my true nature. And I think that as we tap into this information and test it and validate it for ourselves, then this human design is basically going to allow you to fulfill what you're meant to do in this life and for you to stop being exhausted and not really understand what you're doing and really just start to also bring in the people that you're meant to bring in, attract. So that to me is not a typical explanation of human design. Most people would talk about how it's a synthesis of the Kabbalah and the chakra system and all these other things and the I Ching. And yes, that's a super important part of what it is made of. But to me, that's not the exciting part of what human design can actually do for you. And I think, yeah, that's what we kind of have to start thinking about and looking for and expecting of human design. So,
How did you even arrive at human design? What took you down that path?
well, let's see. In about 2017, I had this surprise love experience right in the middle of a marriage that was delve steeped in conflict and two kids. So it gave me the impetus to really say, oh, maybe that I have a better life than what I'm experiencing now. And not through anyone's fault but my own, right? Of stepping into all of that and not being prepared and with motherhood. All of that was a big learning experience, which I greatly treasure. And I'm so glad that I have all of that that came out of the marriage that eventually ended and having the two boys. So with that love experience, I had to stand up for myself and start to say, okay, well, it doesn't matter if my parents and my family don't approve of me looking into psychic energy or energy healing or this human design. And so, as I had realized that from that love experience, like, oh, I have to be, if I want to be the boss of my own life, I have to probably start my own business. And in starting my own business, trying to find different courses for it, I found basically a side group, like a secret group that was called the Woo Crew. And they essentially were all about all of this woo information that was just, it was definitely a passion of mine. Like I'd always been interested in astrology and horoscopes, but they just never felt, how could you know if they're right? Like that, how do you know? That didn't really ever feel real or true because it wasn't specific enough. And so as I allowed myself down that path, I just kept diving deeper and deeper and deeper, even though I was super confused, kept doubting myself and what my energy was, but I kept at it. And about probably 5 years in, I really started making some connections and seeing different patterns stand out. And then I really started to say, okay, like if I'm going to spend the rest of my life talking about this part of human design, then let's do it. And then as I made that commitment to human design and gene keys, which is like a more specific way of looking at human design of like development through life. And as I committed to those things, then it felt like the downloads and the patterns became a lot more clear and applicable, more practical. So it's brought me to here where I'm able to now look at your chart and all the different layers of us and start breaking down how we live in complexity and yet be so very clear on the different layers. So it's been really exciting to see it validated over and over and over by people who are intuitive and are pretty much doing what they're meant to be doing anyway, just kind of not necessarily trusting that it's enough or that it is what it's for, that what they're meant to do. So it's really, really interesting and fun to be that voice and be like, permission slip, go for it.
The intrigue for me, Carlene, is to become more authentic in who I am and anyone else that I run across, that we can truly be our authentic self. And you'll hear people say, be yourself and all of those things, like, but how do you really know without all that conditioning of the world? Because I talk about that a lot, that we are who we are because of the things that we've learned, the places we've been, and the cultures and all of the stuff. But how do you come back to go, this is genuinely me, not anybody else, me? That's my intrigue with it. Is that what human design can do for a person?
I say yes. I say absolutely yes. What I've found in particular to me that resonates as more someone who looks at accomplishments as at least like a benchmark. Am I accomplishing things? Does it seem like I'm succeeding at what I'm trying to accomplish? Not that that's the do all, be all, end all, be all, but it is something that I've always grown up with and lived with, and potentially that can change as I grow into what I'm meant to be doing. I'll probably slow down and just start experiencing life and more relaxation. But for now, when I've found I can very specifically start to say, this is what I'm doing and this is why. And I can have that deep knowing, not just from a chart, but from my experience and how they correlate and how they connect to one another, and having multiple topics like context. So, like, for instance, you're not always the same person all the time, right? Like when you are trying to become a become your true most uninhibited free self, that might be different than if you're trying to be more mature and take on more responsibility. Those are two very different energies that are very distinct. but they're all still part of who you are and how you operate and what you need in order to upskill into your next level. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. What brought to my mind is when people say you got to be more of an adult. You have to be an adult about things. That's what came to my brain when you were saying all this. And sometimes, like, well, where's the person within and the person that's genuine? Yes, do the adult things and be a part of society and productive and all that. But where do you become your own self in whatever it is that you're doing? And honestly, that is again the intrigue for me at looking at this, because sometimes when people say astrology or any of this stuff, some people will think of, oh, this is woo-woo type of stuff. But if you can kind of show and really help someone understand how these pieces work so that they can figure out what their life is like. Are they on the right path? Are they doing the right things? That's my intrigue with it.
Yeah. Well, if you're open, I would love to take a look at your chart and see if we can suss out, as far as in particular, that who you really are, that uninhibited, authentic you. I would love to look at that part of your chart.
Well,
And
there you go. I
I,
asked for it. I'm going to
yeah,
get it.
yeah,
So if the audience is listening, they can also see how this process works. Let's go. Let's do this, Carlene.
yeah, I love it. Just your birth chart, then we would be able to calculate everything about you, right? We'd be able to know what happens and when and why, and your emotions. It would all just make complete sense all the time if that's really how life worked.
I do
Uh,
have a question right there, because
yeah,
as soon as you say stuff like that, some people will go, well, does that mean I don't have choices? Does that mean everything is predetermined for who I am?
yeah. So I would say that someone had very wisely, we'd had the conversation that it's a spectrum where one person might be, if they're, say, they're what they're meant to do in this life is to teach. Now, one person might take it and say, I'm going to teach at a preschool, and they teach at a preschool. Another person might say, okay, well, I'm meant to teach millions of people via the Oprah Winfrey show. You know what I mean? So there is this spectrum of how you actually implement it and what your energy and what you want too. That's a huge part. And what I would postulate is, if we would use this system and look back at other historical figures, we could probably start to point to their path and to say, hey, this is what they did, or maybe, hey, this is what they were trying to do, but they didn't really fulfill it. Like, superstars. I I hesitate a bit to do that just because this is your energy. This is like your soul. This is your spirit that we're looking at. And I don't like to pry into other people's lives that way. It would be an interesting experiment to to just do a study and say, okay, how did your life go? This is how it said it was going to go. How did you feel your life went? You know? And
Interesting.
then, yeah. So I would say there's always choice, but it might just be you're making four lefts before you make the right. So, you know, it might not be popular, but that is what I think. Yeah. You are going to have this, your birth chart, right? So on the left here, you will see your birth chart. And there is always going to be a general theme to your life that you are going to be doing over the arc of your life. It's like a to do, but for the arc of your life. And of course, most people are not going to really have a good sense of accomplishing that because you're only accomplishing it once, right? From the beginning to the end of your life. What I like about things like Lilith returns in particular is Lilith as a as the moon cycle. It's basically a 9 year cycle. So you can start to see repetition. You can just start to see patterns of how you're progressing throughout your Lilith returns. And so that way you can have almost like a story of how you are moving from very tame and maybe caged to more and more uninhibited. And kind of the archetype of Lilith I liked that comes to my mind is, the wild woman dancing in the woods and under a moon. So getting to that level of inhibition, um, where you don't care anymore. You really are your wild self. So that's what I wanted to talk about here. Now, the thing is, we have to kind of do some teasing out because there is differences in your to-do list. So here we're just going to look at yeah, let's look at both. So when we look at the incarnation cross here, this is the first place I look. The trickster is your incarnation cross versus over here, it's the confrontation cross. So just from those words, and again, like it can change based on the time of the day. So maybe even these don't resonate, but I would love to know off the top of your head experience, which do either one of them resonate a little bit more?
Definitely not the confrontation.
Okay.
I
Okay.
don't do confrontations.
Okay. Okay. And it doesn't mean like that yeah, like again, it's part of an arc. So it could be a process, but it sounds like you don't have confrontations really at this point that you've
No,
had to work through. Okay. Trickster. Okay, so let's listen a little bit more about the trickster, see how that feels to you as an overarching theme. So you're very into interactions and exchanges, and you are helping people clarify their values. And essentially, there has been questions about morality, and for you to make sure that your what you are offering as correct, that other people don't try to take you off of that platform and try to shake that away from yourself. Um, and in particular, that when people might come to you and be unsure of what they want out of life, you have a really huge gift of fulfilling people's needs in that, especially in that arena. And you could understand like a good deal, but in particular, you make sure that everyone's needs gets met in that sense. Does that sound?
that sounds a lot like me. Now,
Yeah.
Carlene, I'm curious. This is all based right now off of my date of birth, pretty much.
Yep. Your date of birth and where you were in the world. Yeah. Because it's, like I said, very 64 energies, and this is for the energies converging, is how it comes. So good. Okay. So then we'll just focus on this. So I'll go into next. If that is your to do, if that is what you are meant to do, and you can sit in the knowing and the peace that doing that is enough, that is literally what you're here to do. And in particular, that doing that task will allow you to have a fulfill a specific purpose. So for those again following along at home, we looked at the incarnation cross, which is essentially your sun, earth on both sides of, there's two sets. One is your birth time here, and this is about a quarter of a year earlier. So it ends up being a right angle, essentially. That's how it becomes a cross. And the next part that we're going to look at, the reason why you're doing this, we're going to look at your purpose as what is the reason why. Because everyone, if you've been around a lot of different self-help, they're like, you need a why, you need to know your why. So the why you would do this is to move from turbulence into being able to recognize humanity and really allow people to, and yourself, to really reach a compassionate state.
That's very accurate.
Well,
Very
good.
accurate. My entire mission and vision is to bring people to more compassion, kindness, respect, understanding, love, and gratitude. Those things, those components that actually make us better humans.
Yeah, that's so funny. I think you used the word compassion as the first word too.
I use it honestly because you use it, but I know that what I use,
Okay.
those words are like the components of compassion.
Wow. So I love this because I really find when people are intuitive, they're already doing their to-do lists, right? It almost feels superfluous for me to show up and say, hey, that's what you're doing according to your birth information. I I do find that it is still validating for a stranger to come up and say, yeah, that this is in particular where you find it, and this is where you go to look more up about it, and you can read it yourself. It's not something that, it's not magic. It's not. To me, this is where I'm waiting to get the resources in order to get the science going around it, right? Because people have to be dedicated to the scientific experiments. So, one other layer, real quick, before we go to your authenticity, like your Lilith layer, I wanted to bring it even one level deeper, where this is what I was really, when I found this part of my chart, I was like, this has been what I've been wanting my whole life. So, yes, I'm doing it for this why, but also this personal, deeply personal desire was in there as well. So, is that something, if you would mind, I would share here to
Sure.
see? Okay, we'll give it a shot. So, when we look at here, the 12th gate, it talks about a moving from, they're calling it vanity, to discrimination, in the sense that beauty is not necessarily elitist, it's more of discretion, and knowing that when you put the energy of selectivity for good use, then you will be able to get the gift of really purity, like a pure self and a pure heart. And for me, when I really tapped in and allowed myself to acknowledge how much of my life I'd spent searching for my version of purity for myself, then it was just so validating to allow myself that permission to have that as part of my energy. I don't know how you resonate with that or not. So, purity in the sense that it's like it's part of divine love. So, when we hear the word beloved, and most times we're thinking of another person or potentially divine love as the beloved, there is something within yourself that is that pure divine energy that potentially, in my experience, I had been like, that might be something that you've been seeking in your over the course of your life. And I'm thinking about how, as our human selves, there's a lot of mess, there's a lot of flaws, but thinking that there is like a secret inside of you that opens up as you move through the challenges that you've been in your life, so that that way you can really and truly open up into your own heart and really feel the purity of your heart.
It does, from my own journey of becoming a lot more inclusive and less judgmental to anything or anyone in the world, understanding that we're all connected, understanding that we're all part of something that is so much bigger than our own little individual selves, that we're part of something magnificent, and seeking for us as humanity to become a lot more enlightened in our ability to see each other and allow each other to become whatever each person is capable of becoming, and less judgment. So from that perspective, that's the purity I look at, that a
Mm,
lot of the challenges we face are man-made,
mm,
human-made, let me rephrase it, human-made, and can be worked on to become so much better. So from that perspective, I can see the purity in constantly working on myself to go, if I'm judging or if I'm being critical, or it's like, that's me. That's me in my own path and little box of learning, and allowing. When I open up more, then I can go beyond whatever judgment I may have towards someone else. And it allows me to kind of really see the other individual and take the
yeah.
opportunity to see them. So from that perspective, yes, definitely.
Okay. Beautiful. That is, that's beautiful. I love that you've been through such a journey to keep that space and hold that space for yourself, because that can be a lot more freeing to not be trapped in that box of judgment. I've definitely been there and it doesn't feel good. And yeah, and to be able to gift that to others too, as they listen to you and open themselves up to that more. So that's beautiful.
So, where would
Yay.
the human design take us from where we are now? What would be like the next step for someone?
Well, this was again that what we looked at now, or what we talked about now, is your birth chart. So the next part would be going into a different layer. And whatever you're looking for in particular, we would look at your Lilith return here. So thinking about that, it's a few years away, but like I said, it's a 9 year cycle. So if you're aware of it now, you can understand the energy that's building towards. And in particular, again, we're going to look at your incarnation cross here. And it's the incarnation cross of contagion, which, so this essentially is about spreading concepts of interest. So that's the contagion. It's spreading what you think would be interesting. And what you actually commit to is going to be enhanced uh, or tested by your desires. So as you become more open and aware of your desires, you would be able to bring more of what you're looking to share and allow you to share it with other people more. So really what you would be looking for here is what are the issues that really move you, which it sounds like you've really narrowed it in. So you're well in your way. And you're potentially a torchbearer to to inspire others and to really put a that spotlight on the ideals that resonate with you. And you love sharing that with everyone around you, be it family or business wise, friends. And in particular, it's about figuring out what is truly of substance and how do you share them in a way that's interesting and useful. And it's it's talking about you draw people to you and you are able to combine the interests. In particular, they talk about wealth and prosperity. And so, yeah, so basically, you would have this ability to help things that you want to commit to grow and flourish. And yeah, and taking the pause, you can hopefully sit back and acknowledge the fulfillment that you've been receiving from those type of achievements. So I always say this, the people that are intuitive, they're already doing this stuff. Like this is
Yeah, I
what
was going
you're
to say, true that.
yeah. And so I just love that because it's just so powerful to me to validate like I'm not just coming on here and blowing smoke. You can go and find the same information and read it too. And in particular, what I love about this again is looking at the why. So looking at the why you do this to me is so helpful because just even thinking about the birth chart, would you have said compassion was related to you know, the trickster energy, or would you say it's related to this sharing what's of interest? You know what I mean? So it's like, how would you have known which to relate? So here, what they would say is related in particular to the sharing portion is well, moving from just a desire to a lightness. So in particular, getting more into that as lightness, meaning going into being willing to move in through your suffering and know that when you trust that that is where the magic happens. That so when you allow the meltdown to come out as more of to see the lighter side of life as the jovial like okay life, thanks a lot, like okay, and know that you don't have to take life seriously. You don't have to have the feelings take over you, but you can allow your desires to be a step on the path to have the desires to move through all of the struggle that the desires cause to this feeling of lightness and humor and feeling of almost like an ecstatic state, like in an ecstasy of sense in our feeling and why you want to allow people to focus on all these interesting topics for them to reach that sense of lightness and humor. So that's a very specific related purpose. So, how does that land?
It lands, allowing people to become a lot more light in who they are,
Yeah.
definitely. So we can all
Yeah.
move in a better direction as a humanity.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful that it can go into details about a person's path. How does human design and what you do help someone pick the right pieces for themselves and become a little more authentic? What are the steps that you kind of take them through? And I know we're not going to go through all of them, but if you can kind of describe why human design is a lot more than astrology, a lot more than what they might pick up a book and read. Would you explain that?
Yeah. So, this is essentially to give you that big picture overview of your life. There are so many other parts of your chart that tell you not only the day to day details of how to eat, what sort of environment that you would live in, and therefore start to attract the people that you're meant to attract. And for you to understand your mind better, where you can understand what you see and trust that and really start to use your mind in the way that's meant to manifest, because only some people are meant to use like the visualization type of board. And there's many other ways in order to manifest that other people have that sort of way. So you really, in order to understand how you operate, it's best to have all that information. And it's a system, it's a procedure. So you have to start with your body first, and then you can move into your mind, and that all starts flowing really easily. So that's the one thing. It gives you the day-to-day decisions and lifestyle change in order to optimize your human design and your energy, your true nature. It also starts to give you the different hats. So we went through two different hats with you. And in particular, there's different ways that you show up based on the hat you're wearing, right? So, like if you're going to a children's birthday party, you're going to potentially in your mind have a different hat if you're the magician that's performing versus if you're just the parent of a child versus if you're the child itself and just enjoying the party. That's all very different energies. You show up very differently. So, this overview that we're talking about gives you those hats. And so you can start showing up in the energy you're supposed to show up with. And it also helps you in that sense to understand how you make decisions and what you need to make a decision in each particular context. And so that again is about the day to day, right? The moment by moment that people, myself included, struggled with for so long that you can really start to understand what it is you need in order to make a sound and trusted decision and trust that all of those decisions are going to compound on themselves and bring in what you need exactly.
I want to make sure that I understand it in a way where every person, just like our unique thumbprints and fingerprints, this is unique to every individual based on their own self and their own abilities and their own paths. It has nothing to do with anyone else. Is that right?
Yeah. So it's funny because most people that are coming to me are talking about having problems with other people, myself included. And what to me, this is the best thing about it is once you know what you're meant to do and you can stand in that and have those boundaries around making sure that you're on task with doing what you're meant to do. And you're only going to start allowing people who agree and resonate and support and encourage those things. So it really can help you start to weed out and put better boundaries and communicate with other people that maybe have some fear or some misgivings or just they think that they're doing the best thing, discouraging you from this path. However, when you have language and you start experimenting and testing, you can start to lovingly say, this is my path. This is what I was made for. This is what I was set apart to do in order to make the world a better place for everyone, not just the rich, not just certain, genders or countries or continents. It's for everyone. And that's how I would love for everyone to be able to step into. How can I help everyone that I'm meant to help?
And from your perspective of human design, what would it take for someone to become really good at understanding the human design piece to start with and beginning to rely on themselves using the human design?
It's a commitment. This is a calling. I find that this is not, you can dabble a bit, but I find that if you are interested in human design, it really is a calling and it really does need to be something that you become really committed to and a bit obsessed with because it's you. It's
But for
getting
the
to know.
person who's not becoming a human design expert themselves and would like to rely on someone who is a professional at it, just like any other profession that you would go to a therapist, you'd go to a psychiatrist, and so on, what would it take for someone that comes and sees you, let's say, for them to really begin to understand themselves even better and start making decisions from a level of authenticity? Could you even answer such a question, or is that, am I being too vague in my question?
No, it's a really great question. And I think to me, what I talked about is an overview of your life is the first step. When I think about a life plan, I have a 5-step process essentially, looking at just your life plan. That'll be out on YouTube soon.
Good for
And
you.
so, yeah. So I am wanting to get this information into the hands of as many people as possible that want to try this for themselves and use it to make progress in their own lives so they get to feel fulfillment. And just because I've lived so much in, I'm going to use the word addiction. Mine was love addiction and fantasy. So rather than living in that half mind dream fantasy life and half real life, it always was so disappointing. And so by finding this and using this, what I found is these patterns that just weren't working in human design, essentially finding that overview of your life path and those 5 steps that you'll start to use on each layer of yourself. So you get to know yourself and how your energy operates. Then, as you understand how your energy operates, you can begin to compartmentalize different to-do lists and start to trust that how you make your decisions can be relied upon. As you start to trust your decisions can be relied on, you would go into that day-to-day lifestyle change of using your human design. That's a 4-part, basically a 4-part cycle, talking about your body and your mind and really honing those to be aligned with this energy. And then past that, I would say going back to your life path and just continually honing it. Because, for instance, when we talk about a Mercury return, that's every year. And potentially what you're meant to be talking about could change. So you'll always get an opportunity to share truth. And to me, this is all about the truth of love. How can each of us participate in being one voice towards love in our own different ways? The 64 different energy signatures of love. So, yeah, I think it would be, coming back to your life path and seeing, hey, what am I meant to do now? And going out and doing it.
Another question for you so that people are clear on what this will do for them. Is this something that's going to help you avoid having any challenges in your life?
So, no.
Thank you for saying that.
But it will help you find the causes that are closest and deepest to your heart that are worth fighting for. that you have obstacles no matter what you do. If you're taking a course to become a doctor, there are just skills to be learned, and there are potentially obstacles like an MCAT. It's part of the process. And if you didn't have those obstacles, you wouldn't gain new skills in order to better fulfill that task. And each task that you fulfill, it's going to prepare you for the next task. And if you come across the same task, then you're going to be infinitely more prepared than you were the last time. So it really helps you feel more at home, like you fit into yourself and start to attract the people that will accept you for that person. And so rather than, for me, it's like, I don't fit in. How come I don't have these best friends that I, why does everyone else have best friends? Why don't I have best friends? Now I'm starting to bring in those people that, as I'm being myself more, I'm allowing and opening up for people to come in and be friends and not feel so lost. And who am I even? As when I was, especially in the beginning of my marriage, I completely pretty much gave myself to my husband's hobbies and lifestyle. And that was great for me because I didn't have any interests really, except having kids. And then I didn't really have much personality, I felt. And so this has helped really solidify all these things that, like, for instance, I ask a lot of questions and I find patterns. That's my life to-do list. And when you ask questions that people aren't ready for or that haven't been asked before, it can really annoy some people. And I felt really bad about that, about myself. And so now, as I just say, okay, I'm moving out of those people's fears and I'm going to ask as many questions as I want. And I'm going to explore and I'm going to get to these patterns that I find. And I'm just going to stand in my truths and share. And then the people that come and resonate, then they come. And I don't have to work so hard to be myself and to know that what I'm doing is enough and love myself in the process. So,
That's an incredible insight of why this matters, because there are so many in this world that are looking for just that, for them to be themselves and have the permission from within to go, it's not anyone else's path, it's my path. So thank you for putting it in those words. Carlene, what is the best way for the audience to connect with you?
yeah. So come and learn at YouTube at Your Divine Human Design. That's where I give all my free trainings, and I'm not information gatekeeping. We're getting this information out there. And come find me on Instagram at Your Divine Human Design. And I'm also at TikTok at Your Divine Human Design as well. So come say
That's
hi.
that's awesome. And I have a couple more questions for you. First and foremost, if I put you in front of a group of 20-year-olds, what would you say to them knowing what you know now?
20. Yeah. So 20, I would say that there's an easier way to do this life thing. Yeah, let's look at your life. Let's get you oriented so you can understand why you're here, what you're here to do, and what is that deep longing that you have in your heart that doesn't seem to be filled by anything else. Let's get you understanding yourself in that depth and solid in yourself in that way. That's a wonderful opportunity before you hit your Saturn return, which is essentially a cause ritual of the cosmos to help you into adulthood. So 20s is perfect before you introduce another layer of chaos. Let's go ahead and get you solidified into your birth energy so you understand it. You start trusting yourself as you make decisions and about who's in your life, about who uh, to connect with, about what sort of things you're interested in, to really give you permission to just be you.
Carlene, I appreciate you very much. And this was a very interesting topic for me in the sense that I'm always looking for levels to allow us to know ourselves better, even the stuff that some people will go woo woo or whatever it is, labels that we give to things that we don't clearly understand. So I appreciate you allowing me to play with you. And is there anything that you'd like to say to the audience that I may not have asked you so we don't get off this podcast and go, I wish we had asked that?
Oh, thank you. I would just say that as someone whose part of Incarnation Cross is confusion and doubt, that these patterns of emotions that are in your chart, they're actually flags. They're part of your roadmap that whatever pattern of feelings that you've been stuck in, they're all part of helping you understand yourself and move along your path. And they're all for a purpose. They're not trying to get you, they're not trying to have you live in horribly feeling world. They're here to help guide you. So just I hope that you get to know your chart more so you can get to know yourself to that level of depth. So
Thank you. Please
uh,
follow her on YouTube and learn as much as you can for your own sake and see where this leads you to become a lot more authentic in who you are. And to our dear listeners and viewers, remember our attitude always determines our altitude in life. So the more you can become more yourself and dig deeper into who you are, the better we will be as a humanity. Carlene, thank you. We'll see you in the next video.